There exists a form of self-mastery so rare that even disciplined men fall silent in its presence. And today, you will discover the ancient Japanese system that transforms the weakest mind into unbreakable steel. Have you ever witnessed someone who never falters? Who rises each morning like the sun itself, steady, inevitable, and unwavering? While others negotiate with their own promises, this person simply moves. While others make elaborate plans that crumble by Thursday, they continue. And you know what people whisper? That person is different. That person has something we don't understand. But what they possess isn't luck or genetics. It's access to a sacred discipline developed in the temples of ancient Japan. A system so powerful that it literally rewrites the architecture of your identity. They call it Kaizen, but this isn't the watered-down version you've heard about. This is the warrior's path, the method that transforms your very essence until giving up becomes impossible. Before I reveal how this transformation occurs, I need you to understand something. This system will kill a part of you, not your body, but the internal voice that resists growth. The part that negotiates, the part that bargains with discipline, the part that believes tomorrow will be different without changing who you are today. The awakening. The story I'm about to share begins with a man named David, a software engineer who had everything on paper but nothing in his soul. Successful career, comfortable life, but inside he was fighting a war he could never win. Every Monday brought the same ritual of false promises. This week I'll exercise. This week I'll eat properly. This week I'll meditate. By Wednesday, the negotiations would begin. Maybe tomorrow would be better. Maybe this habit wasn't that important. Maybe he could start fresh next week. By Friday, he would surrender completely, promising himself that Monday would be different. The cycle had repeated for 3 years. David tried everything the modern world offered. Habit tracking applications that became digital monuments to his failures, reward systems that felt hollow after the first week, accountability partners who eventually stopped asking about his progress. He was fighting something invisible, something that lived in the space between intention and action. His mind had become his greatest enemy, and every failed attempt made it stronger. Until the morning he discovered why Japanese monks have maintained the same practices for 800 years without missing a single day. And it wasn't willpower. It was something far more profound and infinitely more frightening. A discipline older than motivation itself. The secret of the warriors. In the ancient temples of Japan, there exists a principle that seems simple, but changes everything at the cellular level. Kaizen. But not the corporate version you've heard about. This is the warrior's Kaizen, the discipline that literally reconstructs who you are. The word translates to continuous improvement, but the monks understood something deeper. They knew that true transformation happens not through massive efforts, but through the complete elimination of the space where your old self can return. In the temple of Eiheiji, every monk rises at 3:30 in the morning. Not 3:25, not 3:35, exactly 3:30. And here's what never happens in that sacred space. No monk lies in bed thinking maybe today I'll skip meditation. The thought simply doesn't exist because they have eliminated the architecture that creates such thoughts. When a monk takes vows before the Sangha, something fundamental shifts in their neural pathways. They aren't making a promise to try. They are declaring a new identity. The community witnesses this transformation. The old self dies. The negotiation ends. Modern neuroscience has discovered something remarkable about this process. When you make a behavior part of your public identity, your primitive brain interprets failure as a threat to your survival. Our ancestors who lost status in their tribe faced death. Your nervous system still operates on this ancient programming. David began to understand that his failures weren't about lack of discipline. They were about fighting biology with the wrong weapons. He had been trying to change behaviors while keeping his identity intact. But identity is the source code. Shift identity and behavior follows naturally. The internal war. Even with this revelation, David discovered that knowing and becoming are separated by an ocean of internal resistance. His body didn't care about his new understanding. When the alarm sounded at 5 in the morning, Every cell in his system screamed for the warmth of his bed. The public declaration had ended the mental negotiation about whether to act, but it hadn't eliminated the biological urge to seek comfort. This is where most people fail. They mistake the beginning of resistance for the signal to retreat. They don't understand that resistance is not a wall. It's a doorway. The samurai knew this truth intimately. In their training, they learned that discomfort isn't the enemy of discipline. Comfort is. When you eliminate discomfort, you eliminate growth. When you eliminate challenge, you eliminate strength. David realized he had been approaching his transformation like a civilian trying to become a warrior overnight. But warriors aren't born in comfort. They are forged in the space between stimulus and response, in the moment when every instinct says stop and the spirit says continue. He began to treat his morning resistance not as a problem to solve, but as a teacher to embrace. Each time his body rebelled against the early hour, he thanked it for the lesson. Each time his mind offered compelling reasons to delay, he acknowledged the creativity of his ego and moved forward anyway. This shift changed everything. Resistance became fuel instead of friction. The internal war became internal alchemy. Struggle became transformation, though one path. But David discovered something even more profound than conquering resistance. He found the secret that separates ordinary discipline from unbreakable discipline: the elimination of choice itself. Most people waste tremendous energy every day on the same meaningless decision. When will I do this? Should it be now or later? Morning or evening? Before breakfast or after? Each decision burns glucose in your prefrontal cortex that should be used for execution instead of deliberation. David chose 5 in the morning. Not because he loved early mornings or enjoyed watching sunrises. He chose 5 because the world was asleep. No emails demanding attention. No phone calls requiring responses. No traffic creating delays. No people creating excuses. The time wasn't about optimization. It was about elimination. Eliminating every possible reason to postpone. Eliminating every variable that could interfere. Eliminating choice itself. When you remove time as a variable, your brain can't argue with a constant. When the schedule becomes as fixed as gravity, resistance loses its power. The first week felt like war. His body fought against the new rhythm with everything it possessed. This is normal. Your physiology is a machine built on patterns, and you're forcing it to build new pathways. It resists because change feels like death to the primitive brain. But by the second week, something shifted. David began waking moments before his alarm. His body was preparing for what it now expected. By day 14, his feet touched the floor before his conscious mind engaged. No thought, no decision, just movement. This is what the ancients called mushin, the mind of no mind. Action without the interference of deliberation, discipline without debate, practice without gaps. David's schedule had become fixed, but he made a critical error that nearly destroyed everything he had built. He allowed variety in what he did during his sacred hour. Some mornings felt right for meditation. Other days called for reading. Sometimes his body craved movement. His brain had found a new negotiation point. Instead of arguing about when, it began arguing about what. 20 minutes at 5 became reliable, but the practice itself became chaos. He had eliminated the when, but not the what. Every small variation was a crack where his old patterns could seep back in. This is where the teaching of Dogen becomes essential. Dogen, the founder of Soto Zen, understood that variety is where consistency dies. Every time you change what you're doing, your brain must make micro-decisions. Should I meditate or read today? How long should each practice last? Which technique feels right? Every decision is an opening where doubt can enter. David locked everything down completely. 20 push-ups, 10 minutes of meditation, 10 minutes of reading the same book, same sequence, same duration, same method. His friends called him robotic. His family said he was becoming obsessive. Perfect. Annoying was exactly the point. By week 3, his mind went to war with the repetition. This is boring. You're not a machine. Mix things up or you'll burn out. Week 4, something beautiful happened. The voice of resistance grew quiet. Week 6, he was halfway through his push-ups before realizing he had started. The practice was practicing itself. Repetition became identity. Pre-solutions. Day 35 brought the test that destroys most transformations. David caught the flu. Day 40, work required travel. This is where the old pattern typically resurfaces. Sick day equals rest day. Travel equals exception day. Perfect practice requires perfect conditions, and perfect conditions exist only in imagination. But the monks of Ikigai understood something about gaps that changes everything. They knew that practice must continue without even a moment of interruption, because in that gap, all old patterns return. What saved David was understanding that practice doesn't require perfection. It requires continuity. The all-or-nothing mentality has destroyed more consistency than laziness ever could. You tell yourself, if I can't do the full 20 minutes, why do anything? If I can't do perfect push-ups, I'll wait until tomorrow. This thinking creates gaps, and gaps are where your former self crawls back in. David wrote down every obstacle that had ever broken his consistency and pre-solved each scenario. Sick day means 10 push-ups instead of 20, 5 minutes of meditation instead of 10, 2 pages instead of 10. Travel day means push-ups in the hotel room, meditation on the plane, reading in the airport. Guests staying over means silent practice in the garage. Each scenario had its predetermined response. When X happens, I do Y. No thinking, no negotiating, just execution. A Yale researcher studying decision-making discovered that when you pre-decide your actions, you remove decision fatigue from the critical moment. Your prefrontal cortex, responsible for willpower, remains intact to execute rather than decide. Day 70. David's practice had become completely automatic. He would sometimes complete his entire routine without conscious awareness, like a river that flows around rocks without deciding how to move. His girlfriend's parents visited for a week. He did push-ups in the bathroom at 5 in the morning. The practice continued because the answers were already written. On day 90, he completed his first Ango, 90 days of uninterrupted practice. But something deeper had occurred. He was no longer the same person. He had crossed the threshold. The transformation. People began to notice something different about David's presence. Coworkers mentioned he seemed more solid, more centered. Friends commented that his discipline was becoming uncomfortable to witness. Someone actually said his consistency wasn't normal. When you hear these words, you know the transformation is complete. Normal people achieve normal results. You're not pursuing normal. You're pursuing unbreakable. The Kaizen system David had implemented wasn't just creating habits. It was reshaping identity at the neural level. Public declaration had eliminated negotiation. Fixed schedule had removed decision fatigue. Identical practice had automated execution. Pre-solved obstacles had eliminated excuses. He had stopped being someone who tries to be disciplined and became someone who couldn't be undisciplined. This is what people don't understand about true transformation. It's not about adding discipline to your life. It's about removing everything that opposes your essential nature. You don't motivate yourself to breathe. You don't force your heart to beat. Why? Because these functions are integrated into your identity. When practice becomes as automatic as breathing, you've reached the level that makes others uncomfortable. The level where people look at you and think that's not human. And they're right. It's not normal human. It's realized human potential. Discipline as existence. The secret beyond secrets. But David's transformation revealed something the ancient masters knew that modern minds cannot fathom. There exists a level beyond unbreakable discipline, a realm where the very concept of effort dissolves into pure being. The samurai called this state Mushin, the mind of no mind. When your practice becomes so integrated into your essence that resistance itself forgets how to form. David began to notice something extraordinary happening around day 120. His morning routine had become so automatic that he would sometimes complete the entire sequence without conscious awareness. His body would rise, move, practice, and prepare for the day while his mind remained in a state of peaceful emptiness. This wasn't distraction or mindlessness. This was the highest form of consciousness the warriors knew. Presence without effort. action without friction, being without becoming. The Zen masters understood this phenomenon intimately. They called it shikantaza, just sitting. But it applies to any practice that becomes so pure, so essential to your nature, that you no longer do it. You become it. When David reached this state, people began to react differently to his presence. Not just noticing his discipline, but feeling something deeper. An unshakable centeredness that made others examine their own scattered energy. His very existence had become a mirror reflecting back the chaos most people mistake for normal life. Stillness that transforms rooms. The ripple effect. The transformation that occurs when you eliminate the gap between who you are and who you practice being, creates consequences that extend far beyond personal discipline. David discovered that his morning practice was reshaping every aspect of his existence without conscious effort. At work, colleagues began seeking his input on complex problems, not because his technical skills had dramatically improved, but because his presence carried a quality of unshakable clarity that made others feel more grounded in his vicinity. His girlfriend noticed that arguments between them had become impossible, not because David had become passive or agreeable, but because the reactive patterns that fuel conflict had dissolved from his system. When she would express frustration or anger, he would listen without defending, respond without attacking, and somehow transform the energy of discord into understanding. This is what the ancient texts call the power of Wu Wei, action through non-action, influence through presence rather than force. David hadn't learned conflict resolution techniques or communication strategies. He had simply eliminated the internal chaos that creates external friction. The nervous system that no longer negotiates with itself naturally creates space for others to find their own center. His family began commenting on the change during gatherings. David's younger brother, who had always been the family rebel, started asking questions about discipline and self-improvement, not because David preached or advised, but because his transformation had given permission for others to consider their own potential. This is the hidden power of authentic change. When you stop trying to convince others and simply embody what's possible, you become a living invitation for transformation. People begin to believe in their own capacity for change because they witness proof that such change is real. Transformation radiates outward. The ancient masters understood what David had discovered through 90 days of unbroken practice. Kaizen was never about changing what you do. It was about changing who you are. When you eliminate the space between intention and action, when you remove the architecture that allows negotiation, when you pre-solve every obstacle before it appears, you don't build discipline. You become discipline itself. This is the secret the samurai carried into battle. Not superior technique or sharper swords, but the complete absence of internal conflict. When your identity and your actions become one, external circumstances lose their power to disturb your center. You move through challenges like water flowing around stones, not because you've learned to overcome resistance, but because you've eliminated the part of yourself that creates it. The path is simple but not easy. Choose one practice. Make it sacred through public declaration. Fix the time until it becomes inevitable. Remove all variables until only pure action remains. Prepare for every obstacle until none can surprise you. Continue without gaps until the practice practices itself. And when people begin to notice something different about your presence, when they say your consistency isn't normal, you'll know the transformation is complete. You are not trying to become someone who practices discipline. You are declaring yourself someone who cannot practice anything else. This is the warrior's way. This is the path of no return. The question that remains is not whether this system works, but whether you possess the courage to let it kill the parts of you that prefer comfort to transformation. What identity will you publicly declare today? Now it's your turn to step onto the path. In the comments below, declare the identity you choose to embody from this day forward. Not a goal, not a plan, an identity. Who do you become when hesitation ends? Write it, seal it, and let this be the first step of your own unbreakable self.